This is a video for an owner who wants to test PCV on his DeLorean. Now, my car is carbureted, so I run PCV through a PCV valve and then into passages in the carb base. He is K-jetted, so his PCV runs through what they call a calibrated nipple and then into the cold start passages inside his K-jet manifold. But the operating principle is the same, and he should get similar results. On my car, I run about 2 to 3 inches maximum vacuum on my crankcase. I would suspect that his numbers should be similar. Now, us carb guys, we turn the oil filler cap around and use the 5/16 barb for PCV and then the 5/8 barb for the fresh air breather from the air filter. This is my usual fresh air hose. I have it disconnected so I can attach the gauge. On his car, the cap would be turned around this way, but we were already up to 1 inch of vacuum. Now we're up to 2 inches of vacuum. You get the idea. You want to pull a vacuum on the crankcase. If you don't pull a vacuum on the crankcase, you will end up building positive pressure inside the crankcase from blow-by. And you will also accumulate combustion byproducts inside the crankcase. In fact, that's the purpose of PCV. Everybody thinks that it's an emissions device. It's not an emissions device. PCV goes back all the way to the 1950s. The car companies discovered that by pulling a vacuum on the crankcase, that they could pull those combustion byproducts out of the crankcase and prevent the buildup of sludge inside the engine. Remember, back in the 50s, engines with that terrible motor oil that we had and the terrible gasoline, they would sludge up something fierce. So it was an attempt to stretch out engine life. If you're not pulling a vacuum on the crankcase and you're building up positive pressure, you will find oil coming out of all kinds of places that oil would not ordinarily come out of, especially the valve covers. Your valve covers are full of oil, and your valve covers are connected to the crankcase. So if you put positive pressure under your valve cover, it's going to be very difficult to keep oil from coming out around your valve cover gasket. That's one of the signs of a clogged PCV system, is when you cannot keep your valve covers oil tight. And of course, on a DeLorean, remember, we also have the access plates for the camshafts. They're connected to the crankcase. And of course, the timing chain cover is connected to the crankcase. So if your PCV is not pulling a vacuum on the crankcase and you've got positive pressure inside the engine, you're going to have oil coming out of all kinds of hidey holes, and you'll be pulling your hair out trying to figure out where the oil is coming from. So check your PCV first. Make sure that you are indeed pulling a vacuum on the crankcase, because if you're not, you need to address that before you start trying to chase all these oil leaks, because fixing your PCV may well fix your oil leaks.